Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge, where I sit with some of the theater's best and brightest, just chatting it up. SAG Foundation and BroadwayWorld have partnered for a filmed Conversations Q&A series celebrating the vibrant theater community here in New York City and the union actors who aspire to have a career on both stage and screen. This special event, which is coming from the Baruch Performing Arts Center, is a career conversation with one of our greatest actresses, Emmy and two-time Tony Award winner Cherry Jones, who is giving a career-defining performance as Amanda Wingfield opposite Zachary Quinto, Celia Keenan-Bolger, and Brian J. Smith in director John Tiffany's stunning new production of the Tennessee Williams classic, The Glass Menagerie. Please welcome Miss Cherry Jones. So you just opened to rave reviews. Have you been able to put the last week or so into perspective?
We just get to do it.
Yeah.
You know, it is, I will say that having been doing this for about 35 years, this, I think, has a feeling to it unlike anything that I've ever been involved with. And I think part of it is the way, the esteem in which many of us hold the play. And for those of us that somehow the play escaped us, people are being reintroduced to it in a way that they never imagined, that they would be able to feel it, you know. So there's an appreciation that we all have about this production. We feel the same way. We feel very appreciative to John Tiffany, this boy from Huddersfield, Yorkshire. You know, leave it to a Yorkshire laddie to show us, to reintroduce us to this masterpiece. And he just, I like to say, he clears away all the weeds. And what we're left with is just those, the emotions and the feelings and what we remember in memory. We don't remember what kind of cutlery our mother had in 1987. We remember our mother across the table telling that story about her childhood in the backwoods of Wisconsin or whatever. You know, that's what we remember. And occasionally we'll remember a piece of cutlery. So it becomes totemic, you know. And that's what John does as well. The things that we do use become totemic, you know. I'll stop there. You asked a very simple question.
They're just asking if you could hold it just a little higher. I know, it's terrible. Pretend you're a singer. Cherry Jones, singer.
I've got you under my skin.
I see a CD in the making. Now, I want to go back. How did Glass Menagerie come about for you? Because you originally said no to this role because you thought you were incapable of it. Did you?
I was one of those ignorant people. I was, who lacked the experience and the loss and the poetic soul in reading the play to appreciate what a masterpiece it was. I also was very lucky to come from a happy family People who loved one another would never have spoken ugly to each other. And I mean, truly. So all of that was so off-putting to me. And it was a world that I didn't know and didn't want to know and didn't care about, you know. And Amanda seemed like another, I am Southern, so it was that little chip on my shoulder of another freakish Southern lady, you know. Because there's so many, it's always, we're all freaks a little bit, you know. And I just didn't, I don't know. So we did a reading of it. He would not let me say no. He was like a dog with a bone. He would not let me say no. So finally we did a reading of it up at New York Theater, upstairs at New York Theater Workshop. And little Kristen Mialotti from Once read Laura, and Michael Esper read Tom so beautifully. And I cannot remember the name of the boy who played the gentleman caller. It wasn't Brian J. Smith, who we have.
Yeah.
But in that reading, I realized, oh my gosh, I not only understand this and have great respect for it, but I feel a responsibility to do it. Because I'm of that generation. I'm that last standing, my generation of actresses are the last who really knew those women. Barely. When I was 10 years old, Miss Margaret Porter, Miss Jewel Compton, Miss May Coram, Miss Odessa Mitchum, all of these women had been born in the 1880s, like Rose and, like Edwina Williams and Amanda Wingfield. And I knew their voices. And I had great historical respect for what those women went through. And I was fascinated by the fact that somehow I had always missed in the reading of that play the fact that this is a Victorian woman who was abandoned just before World War I in German Catholic St. Louis with no skill set and 2 children. No skill set. And how did she feed and clothe and shelter those children? Because if she could have gone back to Mississippi, she would have. And she couldn't. And I don't think there was anything to go back to. So that was my first question when I started working on it, was it just never had occurred to me before. Because you always, it's the Southern Belle-ness of it is played up. And when you're a Southern belle, food just falls from the heavens, I guess. I don't know. And that was not the case. And you can be a Southern belle all your life, if that's what you want to be, and you got money. But if you ain't got no money, you're not a Southern belle anymore. And I really question how much of a classic Southern belle she ever was. Because I think the money was gone by the time she was born. I think that cotillion dress was bought by a couple of great aunties who still had a little bit of cotton money from, pre-Wawa. They had a little bit of, ill-gotten gains, and that paid for that girl's cotillion dress. She met that man, and he got her to stop talking underneath those dogwood trees, and she's loved him every moment of her life since, and she's still madly in love with him.
Yeah.
And that's why the portrait's still on the wall. The portrait's still on the wall. Yeah.
So I want to talk about your director.
Sorry.
No, that's perfect. No. Singing, remember, you're singing here. No, not at all, because, it's such a challenging role, because I've always seen women play her like a monster, and she's not a monster.
She loves those children.
More than anything in the world.
More than anything in the world. They are alien to her.
Yeah.
But she loves them.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a few mothers out here who understand that very well.
This production is the perfect ensemble. Talk about your fellow cast members and how you bonded. You're a family.
We don't even call ourselves an ensemble. We call it the quartet.
Yeah.
And we really did just fall madly in love with each other. We it's that wonderful thing when you're working on something out of town and your real life just goes away and you have no real responsibilities except, the show. And every single night, during rehearsals and performance, we would go over to Zachary Quinto's apartment because, of course, he had the coolest one of all of us. It was very old and fashionable, and looked out on Mass Ave, and we would sit there and talk and play music and talk about our families and probably drink too much bourbon occasionally, and till the cows came home. And it was just heaven. We went through this, at A.R.T. you have 4 weeks rehearsal, you have 3 days tech, and then you have 3 previews, and then you're open. It's fast. And for this play, that's fast. And so the fact that we really got to know and love and trust one another helped so much, you know. And so the one night we opened on a Wednesday night, we played Thursday night. Friday, that crazy blizzard hit, and Cambridge got 25 inches in about 16 hours. And so they canceled Friday, and they canceled 2 on Saturday. And then we played 1 on Sunday, had Monday off, and that Tuesday was when Ben Brantley came. And thank goodness I didn't know he was there, because we'd had a lot of time off.
You were working with one of the finest directors, John Tiffany. What makes him such a great director?
Well, he has a vision. He comes in with a vision, but it's not a rigid vision. He knows the touchstone things that he wants to accomplish. He knew that Amanda and Laura came out of the furniture. That was one of the first things he told us, and Celia and I were like, okay. We'll leave that one to Bob Crowley. And he knew that they were so excited with this notion that we were going to be completely isolated. They had been to an art exhibit, and some of you may know who the artist was. I do not. It was in London, and it was a room filled with sump pump oil, which I can hardly believe they allowed, because that would have an odor and I would think would be incredibly dangerous. So maybe, in fact, it was not sump pump oil, but it was made to look like that. Well, then they decided they wanted us to be floating in sump pump oil. It's fun to say. And they, you know, it doesn't matter that you all know what it is. It's glycerin. Glycerin with some black dye thrown in or something, which gives it a viscosity so that when it finally does move, it doesn't just ripple like water. It has a thicker, more poetic ripple, more laconic ripple or something. I don't know. But the thing about John is he is such an incredible collaborator. And he makes everyone in the room feel like we have an investment. From the woman, the amazing prop woman, Cindy Lee at A.R.T., who built the couch that works beautifully in this production. I know some of you haven't seen the show. I forget that because the couch is such a friend of ours that let's see. But he has this, he's funny, he's like a little boy, he's kind, he's generous. He cried pretty much when he wasn't laughing, he was crying in rehearsal. And his notes in previews and were excellent. In fact, he called me today to discuss something. And I said, John, I woke up this morning thinking about how that note about the contract between Amanda and Tom is working like gangbusters all the way to the final scene of the play. And he said, ooh, I'm so glad to hear you're so in it that you can hear my Yorkshire accent. That was really good. No, he just loved that he so excited us and filled us with this play that we just think about it kind of nonstop right now.
This production is so clear and pure and perfect. At what point during the process of working on it or performing it did it all come together for you?
I think, quite honestly, once we were up in front of an audience and we got the feedback that we had from the audience, we knew that we were doing something right. And certainly watching the gentleman caller scene, I knew they were doing something right from the first day of rehearsal. I mean, that I wish everyone could have seen the procession of the work on that scene. It's just been a thrill of a lifetime to watch Celia and Brian J. Smith structure with John that scene. But I knew that was perfect. I knew Zach and Celia in the drunk scene were perfect. I knew the things that I was not in were perfect because I could see it, and I knew they were perfect in the rehearsal room, you know. And I wasn't sure. I was always afraid I was too over the top, and John kept trying to get me to be bigger. And then finally, I just gave over to being really big. and then I saw that the audience was responding, and that's when I started to have confidence in it.
So when you were growing up, where did your love for performing begin, and what were those early creative outlets? Did you have them early on?
Well, Mom and Daddy both had beautiful singing voices. Daddy was a tenor and Mother was a contralto, and so they sang at, you know, the Cancer Society benefits at the City Civic Hall and all sorts of different events. So I grew up seeing them singing these beautiful romantic duets together. April in Paris was, of course, a popular one in Paris, Tennessee. And so I was around, and my grandmother, Thelma Cherry, who I was also extremely close to, who worked at Daddy's flower shop, always wanted me to be an actress. She would say, "You're not going to get married. You're going to be my career girl." How did she know? But she would have just she would love what is happening right now. She would be right where you are. She would just love it.
Well, everything changed for you again when you auditioned for the American Repertory Theater, A.R.T. in Boston. Look back at those years and working with them and what that all meant to you.
Well, that was my training.
Yeah.
Without a question. By some bizarre fluke, this Romanian director named Andrei Belgrader, I don't know if any of you all know Andrei, he's a character and I love him dearly. And he hired me to play Rosalind in As You Like It at the A.R.T. in 1980, the summer of 1980. And I just never left. I mean, I stayed there for 10 years. It was 6 out of 10 seasons, but I was there 80 through 90, most of those years.
In 1988, after a national tour, you arrived back on Broadway as Lady Macduff in Macbeth, that beautiful production with Christopher Plummer and Glenda Jackson. What were they like to work with?
Was it beautiful?
I thought it was gorgeous. Did you think it was beautiful? It was dark.
It was fraught, is
Yeah.
what it was.
Because on the road it kept changing, right, or whatever?
We had 5 Macduffs. Wait, just have to tell you one quick one. So we started in Stamford, Connecticut. After 3 weeks of it, this is the best part. So we're rehearsing at the Old Manhattan Theater Club down on 16th Street, and it's about 2 degrees outside. It's January. And we come in, and there is a raked, like fanned, big fan, scalloped rake like this, with a big sign on it that says, "No one is allowed to go on this without rubberized tennis shoes, whatever." And I just remember Chris Plummer looking at this rake. I mean, it was the most absurd thing you'd ever seen. And great Tony Walton had designed it, but I don't know quite what he was thinking. And Glenda Jackson, you know, they're these 2 great actors looking at this rake like this. And Glenda sitting up under a "do not smoke" sign, just chain smoking her junket like this. And she'd never done Shakespeare before, and I remember at the read-through, she read it like this. We never saw her face once. She read the entire thing like that. And then we went from Stamford to Baltimore, and the director was let go. We had 3 directors. Did I mention that, along with the 5 Macduffs? The first director was let go. A second director came in. New ground plan, new set. Performing old production at night, rehearsing new production on new ground plan by day. No place to rehearse it for the first week. So they finally, the only place they could get first to rehearse this was on the proscenium stage of the Baltimore hockey rink. And it was about 48 degrees on that stage. And we were all in mufflers. And by this point, Chris had thrown out his back and neck with the broadswords. So he is in a neck brace in a wheelchair. And Glenda Jackson's pushing him around in this wheelchair. And that was just Baltimore. We still had Pittsburgh and Toronto and Boston. And this is the last thing I'll say about that. So we're playing the O'Keefe Center. We're playing the O'Keefe Center in Toronto. And if anyone knows that, it's about a 4,000-seat house. And it's the kind of, I'm the one who's speaking. You know, I'm serious. You're that big. And we would you know, we would do this thing that Robin Phillips would have us fussy on and fussy off. And it was great because you would run on and you'd stop, and then you'd play the scene, and then you get the hell off, you know. Well, we went from there to the Colonial in Boston. And of course, we would fussy on and fussy off, and this is what would happen. This is what happened the first night. Boom, 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 boom. Because the Colonial's this big, and the Colonial wings are this big, and so everyone ran off, and they were just like boom, 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 boom. Chris got a front tooth knocked out. Serious, I'm not making this up.
Well, we're going to go back into the Heiress. That was so glorious, that beautiful production, right? Oh. One of the greatest directors, Gerald Gutierrez. I loved him with his dog. He used to do his interviews with his little dog. I loved him.
Phyllis.
Yeah. What was that like? Memories again. I know the dress, gorgeous. Working with that cast.
It was the first time I got the call. I got this script from my agents, and the young, agent said, they want you for Aunt Penniman. And I said, okay. And I started reading the script. And at this point, I was 38. And clearly, Aunt Penniman is, I would think, at least in her 50s or 60s. And I remember thinking, this is what happens. People told me it would be this way. 1 minute, you know, you're the leading lady, and the next minute, you get close to 40, and you're the old aunties. And I just thought, but I didn't really think it would happen so quickly. I still have kind of a youthful face, and, you know. And I started reading it, and I kept looking, of course, at the part of Catherine and thinking, oh, whatever very young actress is going to play this is going to be so lucky. And I could feel how she breathed, and I could just feel her. And I was so sad that I wasn't going to be playing her. And then my agent called back, and she said, oh, I'm so sorry. They want you to look at the part of Catherine. I'm like, oh, thank you. And then she called back about an hour later, and she said, oh, I'm sorry, and it's an offer. I was like, oh. Because and that was how Jerry worked. I think every single person in that production, it was an offer. Because he knew that actors responded well when they knew they were wanted from the get-go. Yeah. I mean, isn't that a brilliant way to do?
You won your second Tony Award for your brilliant performance as Sister Aloysius in John Patrick Shanley's beautiful play, Doubt. Mm-hmm. This play was originally given to you by Doug Hughes?
Yes.
All right, so you read it. What did you think?
I loved it.
Yeah, right away.
Right away. I thought I've never read a play like this. And then I thought, oh, I think I could do this. And then, of course, I thought, I can't do this. You know, I'm Methodist from Tennessee, for starters. You know? And I think they'd gone through a lot of different other folks who turned it down. Several different women had turned it down. Yeah. And finally, Doug kept trying to convince Shanley to use me. And Shanley'd never seen my work, and quite frankly, I'd never seen any of Mr. Shanley's work because we'd been lucky and been busy, and I'd just never auditioned for a Shanley, and I hadn't seen him, and he hadn't seen me, so he was there at the first read-through, And of course, now I realize that he was there to sort of say yay or nay to me, and fortunately, I didn't disgrace myself in front of him, but I was far, far away from where I ended up because Doug Hughes was such a wonderful director. He just stayed on me. He made me, I kept saying, he just made me be more and more and more horrific. And I kept saying, Doug, there's no way. I said, I've got to at least have half of the audience on my side. Everybody's just going to love him. They're just going to love little Mary Sunshine over there, you know. And he said, trust me, you have got to be granite. And he was absolutely right. That's the point of the play, doubt, you know, that she has none in those early scenes. And the doubt that she has at the end of the scene is debatable. You know, we can discuss what that was.
Yeah.
But it was fun to play once I fully understood. And he moved that like a bat out of hell. Yeah. It was 90 minutes long.
Oh, yeah.
They did it at Pasadena Playhouse at the same time. We were doing it at Manhattan Theater Club. The brilliant Linda Hunt played Aloysius.
Yeah.
But their running time was like 2 hours and 10 minutes. You know, so it's that Doug understood that you had to sort of keep ahead of the game, because it's not rocket science, that play. You know, you really do have to stay ahead of the audience.
Yeah. You have not the slightest proof of anything.
But I have my certainty. And armed with that, I will go to your last parish and the one before that, if necessary. I will find a parent. Trust me, I will. A parent who probably doesn't know that you are still working with children. And once I do that, you will be exposed. You may even be attacked, metaphorically or otherwise.
You have no right to act on your own. You're a member of a religious order. You have taken vows. Obedience being one, you answer to us.
You are known to millions of television fans for playing President Allison Taylor on 24, for which you won the Emmy for. How did that role happen for you?
I got a call from my agent, and it was right at the time that my parents' health was in a steep decline. And Mother had had a series of strokes, and Daddy had Parkinson's, and I needed to get home to Tennessee. And I didn't, all of a sudden my agent called and said, they want you to come meet the producers. And I'd never wanted to do television. I was such a theater snob, complete theater snob. And they said, there's a part in 24, which I only really knew about because Charlie Rose liked it, and I love Charlie Rose. He had the entire cast and the producers on, and I thought, well, if Charlie Rose likes it, you know. But so I went out and made, and I think, well, my agent said 24, and I thought, that's that. Charlie likes it, because that shoot-up thing about a spy or something. I didn't really know what it was. And he said, well, I said, what's the part? And he said, the President of the United States. I said, oh. Oh. And I said, do I get my own Oval Office? He said, I believe so. So I went out and I met with these gentlemen, and I had just finished doing Sister Aloysius. I mean, just finished that long, long tour, 703 performances, all told. And I like to joke that from playing Aloysius to the President, it was a linear move, you know. I didn't have to do much except take the bonnet off, you know. And I met with them. I got back in the car that they had sent to drive me from the hotel out to Chatsworth, and I referred to it as Death Valley, out there over the mountains there where it's quite hot. And I was in the car going back to the hotel, and my agent called, and he said, like 20 minutes later, and he said, they want you. And I remember thinking, wow, and we're on the freeway, and I'm watching all these cars go flying by, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to have to learn how to drive on these roads. I swear to God, that was my first thought. I thought, because, you know, I rent cars and I drive, but I don't do that kind of driving. And so that was a big consideration. But it was a heavenly, I had the time of my life. Basically, all I had to do was show up about 3 days every 2.5 weeks. I'm not making this up. Be paid more money than I'd ever known was possible, and look really serious. And that's the truth. And I won an Emmy for it.
Because I want to get personal for a second. I've had many openly gay actors sitting in this chair, including Michael Urie, Jim Parsons, David Hyde Pierce, and Billy Porter, discussing their decision to come out and how freeing it was for them both personally and professionally. And you have done so much for gay rights, and you've always been in the forefront. Please.
I haven't really. Well,
but you're
thank
out
you.
there, you're a voice that people can look at and everything else. Was it ever an issue for you? Did you ever grapple with it, professionally or personally, about coming out and what it would do to your career or anything?
I never did. I went to a drama program, college, where everybody was gay.
Yeah.
You know, I went into a profession that's rife with homosexuality. I have lived in, Greenwich Village since 1986.
Yeah.
Almost 20 years after our forefathers and Stonewall, so the way was paved for me by the time I came along. And the only time I had, the only time I had any question about it was, I remember, because the Heiress brought me to national prominence, and I was having interviews, knowing that I was now going to be on record in a high-profile way. And Mary, my partner of 18 years, we're no longer together, but we are dear friends. And Mary's mother, who was Irish Catholic and lived with us, did not know that we... She lived downstairs. And there was a little apartment beneath our little apartment, and we got that so she could be with us. And I remember it was Green, Blake Green, from what would that be, Newsday, or anyway. She was sitting there in my dressing room with the Heiress, and she said, "So, are you with anyone?" And it was like I saw this neon light over her head flashing. Here it is, here it is, here it is, here it is. And I looked at that flashing light and I thought, yes, Mary O'Connor. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, and I just want to know when this is printed and just make sure it doesn't go, and we'll just make sure Mrs. O'Connor doesn't go to the newsstand that day. And But somehow I managed to be open about my sexuality, and we managed to protect Mrs. O'Connor at the same time. But it was very important to, and Mary tried to tell her.
Yeah.
My favorite, Mary tried to tell her one day, and she said, "Mother, I need to talk to you about something." And Mrs. O'Connor said, she was from Cleveland, "Will it trouble my soul?"
What is the best bit of advice that you've been given that you still live by?
Mama always said, never confuse your self-worth with your professional success or failure.
Thank you for the most beautiful afternoon.
Oh, thank you, Richie. Thank you.
This has been pure magic.
Thank you all. Thank you all.